So I like to think that if you are interested in policy or politics, a group like ours allows you to participate and be adjacent to those things without necessarily committing to a particular party or side. In fact, we are nonpartisan at the Cato Institute. We don't take stances as an organization. Our scholars do based on their research. And we do allow for a great degree of disagreement. Everybody there tends to have a focus on our four core principles, which is limited government, free markets, civil liberties, and peace. So the opportunities I'm going to talk to you about today include the internship program mainly. So the internship program accepts about 20 students every semester. That's spring, summer, and fall. Unlike a lot of internships in DC, it is paid hourly at $16.10. And when you go on our website, which will be shared with you, you will have really quite a variety of options, about 30 actually for placement. So the best way to sort of make sense of that is to kind of go over the fact that the internship program is meant to be a reflection of Cato itself. Cato is partly an academic institution that is a home for scholars and also partly a professional policy-oriented think tank. So what that means is that you get a multidisciplinary education in economics, policy, law, legal theory, philosophy. You also get opportunities to improve your networking skills along with communication and presentation. And so there are also a number of roles that are more scholarly oriented and some roles that are more operationally oriented. So we have roles in IT, we have roles in social media, events, what have you. So that's a bit of a blurb about the internship program. Now, the basic thing with the internship program is that we are really hoping that it prepares you for the next stage of your life, whatever that is. So you don't need to necessarily want to go into public policy. Now, that being said, the next opportunity I'm going to talk about is a little bit more geared toward people who want to commit to that field. That is our research associate program. Unlike the internship, that is based on departmental need. You fill out an application, and then based on which department might have need for a research associate, they'll look at your resume, and then and in many cases, people who have gone through the internship program, it's quite logical for them to, in fact, transition to a research associate role. Research associates are 2 years at Cato, and they are salaried with competitive benefits. Are there any questions so far? All right. So basically, I'm now going to move a little bit into applying to the internship program. Now, we in student programs do not ask for resumes. Because we prefer to have you go through an application process that is essentially a series of short answers that gives us an indication of where you are at in your career, but also where you're developing intellectually, because there are educational components to this program, and we want to get a sense of, what things have contributed to the way you think over the years, and to what extent are you going to engage with the education in, again, economics, philosophy, politics, law, what have you. So there are three main things that I ask people to keep in mind, because when you approach the application, it will be a little bit unique. This is indeed our process. We like to think that essentially we try to get a handle on number one. Are you able to give us a consistent, coherent narrative? What do I mean when I say that? So we begin with asking what your long and short-term goals are. We then ask what kinds of books or ideas have contributed to your philosophy, and it's very interesting to read those answers, frankly. But then you're also asked to indicate which of the departments would be the best fit for you. So that is number two. So consistent narrative. Again, don't treat this like a test. Every answer should try to basically tell a story about yourself. Number two is consider among, again, the different placement options online. Once the link is shared with you for placement, you'll go and find a breakdown of all of the different positions, the expectations, and the kind of work that you will be doing. So consider, what have you done up until this point that would make you a good fit? And what do you want, importantly, what do you want to do with this? Because it'll give us an indication of, all right, working in this department will contribute to your career. Again, that's why we give you so many options, is because there are variable paths that people can take. So demonstrate to us that the work you'll do for that department will prepare you for what you want to do. So again, consistent narrative, don't treat this like a test with isolated answers. Determine and focus on your best departmental fit. And then number three, obviously bright students like you don't need to be reminded to check your spelling, check your punctuation, be concise, but as detailed as you possibly can. One final thing I will offer, or rather add, is that it might be a bit more possible to, for those of you in DC, to actually come and visit Cato. So we are willing to provide you a tour of the building, a free lunch, as well as a lecture from one of our scholars. You know, if you're not sure necessarily about internships, we still allow you to engage with our scholars it could be a networking opportunity if the scholar is willing to connect with you. And so that is one thing that we also offer. So we have, basically it's called our briefings program. You fill out a form online, give us your name and how many people you think you'll be bringing, what types of topics you would like to hear about. Again, you have a range of topics based on our many different policy areas. They include foreign policy, criminal justice, civil liberties. A big one that we're going over is housing and zoning regulations, etc. So again, for those of you in the city, that might be something that could happen in person pretty feasibly. So please feel free to reach out and let us know if that is indeed what the basis of your interest is, even if you're not necessarily, you know, if you're looking at other options for internships. That's another offer that I'd like to give. We also can't offer these virtually, of course, if that ends up being a little bit more convenient. So anyway, I think that's a summary and that's about it. I'll open it up to any questions at all that you all possibly have. So I think what we'll do is we'll start with a couple in the room and then we'll go online after that. So yeah.
I think you mentioned at the beginning how long you've been with Cato, but what got you interested in their think tank and what motivated you to apply and join?
Sure. So I actually am unique in that I wasn't a Cato intern, and some of our employees are, but I, throughout my college years, encountered a number of YouTube videos that were put out by Cato and Cato scholars. We have a huge repository on YouTube. And I just really became interested in how accessible they were trying to make very complicated ideas. And when I first entered college, there were a lot of things I didn't really know about, like the basics of economics and history and political philosophy. You know, I thought I was smart in high school, but then you're just kind of blown away by these really complicated ideas. And it was interesting because, you know, when you're in DC in particular, like, you know, it's a lot of DCs, people struggle to sort of define what exactly it is they do, you know, and that's because the way government works and policy, it's really just this incomprehensible web to people. And what I found was that throughout college, once I gave those videos and those podcasts that Cato put out a shot, I actually became a lot more confident. And now, you know, I feel like I can actually have a job in DC and interact with people who are highly intelligent and deal with this kind of complicated things. And so it felt empowering to basically watch their content. And so because it was such a part of my intellectual development, when I finished grad school, I decided to look for jobs, and I was very excited to find a position for student programs because at the end of the day, I really, really value education. That's always something I've wanted to be a part of. And I think the Cato Institute is the type of organization where I can make an impact. Yeah, anybody else?
I'm an international student actually, and I think I'll brag that the institute offers like sponsorships. If someone is like actually.
So we do offer, I guess what is meant by sponsorship is that if you need a visa, like we will be willing to sponsor you for that. But if it's more like in terms of, okay, I see what you're saying. So if you need to have sponsorship for a visa, like let's say, you know, you want to intern with us, you know, during a semester when your current visa, the student visa is going to run out, then yeah, if you conveyed us on the application that you are in need of sponsorship, then yes, we do offer that to a number of international applicants. Yeah. Welcome. Someone else.
So you touched on this when you answered his question, but what have you enjoyed the most working with that?
By far, I've spent some time in higher ed more broadly, and one thing that's really surprised me about the Cato Institute is that even people who are in fairly high positions with pretty noteworthy reputations are willing to take the time of day to talk to interns and students. And I think fundamentally as an educator, that humility, that approachability is very important. Like one example, a couple examples I give. So there was a very famous Supreme Court case called DC versus Heller, which essentially went over the right to have firearms in the city of DC. A couple litigants from that case are very active with our program. You know, people like that, you know, in terms of being so high profile, you know, it doesn't occur to me that, you know, they could just live the rest of their lives, you know, making appearances at only the highest, the top events. The fact that they take the time of day to talk to students suggests a lot of humility. I can name a couple of other examples. We have a distinguished professor emerita of economics at Illinois, named Deirdre McCloskey. And she's a phenomenal person in general, but what's so fascinating about her is, even, towards the end of a very long and storied career, she wants to work at a place like Cato and actually work, be there more so in full time. And she's always willing to talk to students, that's what's been so fascinating to me, is that these people I encountered in the videos I watched during college, and I thought, oh man, these are like larger than life figures. And you get that, when you see people on the news, these like academics and these scholars. And I've just been so almost like privileged but blessed to feel that in a way I'm able to interact with these people. And it turns out, they're so, I guess, meeting your heroes isn't always a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like it's very wonderful to see that, because I don't know if I see that in a lot of higher education institutions. So yeah. Anybody else? You have a question?
Yeah, so what makes Cato different and better than other think tanks or nonprofits or development agencies that have Washington?
So I would say there is that what I mentioned, but I would also say that it's really, a very nice camaraderie develops. We have a collective workspace actually for the interns, which most places, as I'm aware, they just kind of put you in whatever office they can fit you in. So we have a very collaborative environment. We treat you really in many ways like employees for a certain period of time. That does mean come with expectations, of course, for professionalism and work ethic, but the extent to which interns form a community of themselves, and these are people from different parts of the country, different universities, different parts of the world even. It's really been awesome to see the amount of camaraderie that develops, how in touch the scholars are willing to be with the students, and again, how much intellectual diversity we really allow. Again, we don't commit people to stances. A lot of other nonprofits, even if they are 501c3, have a particular, almost a top-down kind of imposition of, and that's, that is what it is. Nonprofits are based on what people want to give money to. But the Cato Institute, we really treasure intellectual diversity. So I would say it's those things. Are there any questions? I'll get to you in a minute, sir. Are there any questions online, just to make sure I don't?
Yes, we have a couple questions. One is, what class years are usually considered for fellowship positions?
Okay, what class years? So, well, okay, fellowships or internships? Definitely fellowships.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not really, we don't really make that basis, but it tends to be people who are in grad school or who are further along. That does tend to be the candidates who find themselves in those roles. That's really all I would say. It's not like we consider like anyone in particular. It's just that those tend to be the people who can commit to working in DC full time for a couple of years. And at the very least are at a point in their careers where, again, that's not exclusively the case, but they generally are at a point in their careers where they understand what they want to do enough to where it's more like the research associate role, and it is associate, not fellowship. There are different terminologies basically. But so those tend to be the people who find themselves in those positions, because in many ways, those tend to be the best positions for people at that time. But again, many research associates start as interns, and interns can range from like freshmen and sophomores to people in law school, even frankly. So it's a pretty wide, diverse group of people. Yeah. Maybe one more question online, and then we'll get to the gentleman over there.
One question is, are associate roles offered in particular seasons?
Again, it is based strictly on department need, and so I wouldn't say, but again, that does change year to year. So I would encourage people to definitely get in touch with me, and then certainly apply, and then recognize that the internship is often an experience that can lead to one of those research associate roles. It allows you to, again, that's like a lot of positions, frankly. You start out at a very entry level position, and then you work your way up in organization. So, all right, you got a question?
Yeah, so as like I'm going through the academic career, what skills do you think are the best to try to develop through school?
An academic career is that, what do you want to do? You want to teach?
I want to work for the board to I said,
Oh, very good, very good. Well, I will say I'm not necessarily a scholar, but what I would probably say is obviously, the basics of it start with like written communication and, obviously being able to, and what I mean by that is like, being able to, particularly if you're like advising, people in leadership positions, be able to distill complicated ideas into 3 or 4 sentences, be able to be able to convey something that's very complicated in as easily accessible a means as possible. Obviously, you know, language ability, obviously, like if you can learn like more than, you know, 2 languages, frankly, I would say that puts you in a very good position. Again, I'm not necessarily an expert in this, but if you'd like to connect with me, I'm sure I could provide you a little more guidance or perhaps point you to someone who could. But then also, you know, understand very clearly, you know, what you, I mean, again, this is all, that's kind of general, but you know, what role specifically, you know, understand the ins and outs of like, what kind of organization do you want to be a part of? You know, look at somebody who has your role and, you know, envision or even maybe try to get, you know, get a little bit of the experience of the person in that role. And then one thing in general that I find is really good, if you're trying to get into a position where you have to manage or mentor somebody, try to understand how that person gets that job done. Like understand how the person who reports to you, how their job works. That to me was, I think, in many ways, like that's been the big difference between me getting a job at many different places, frankly, is, you know, do I understand not just how to do the manager's job, but to do the job that the manager is managing. So that's what I would say. I wish I had a bit more of a foreign policy background, but yeah, I hope that helps. All right, any other questions in the room? All right, how about online?
Yeah, we have a couple online.
Sure.
questions. One is a writing sample necessary if I want to work on immigration policy?
No, you just, I mean, again, the writing sample is in many respects, it is, that is your writing sample, you know, there are sections for short answers, some of them can be longer. Again, try to be as detailed as possible without necessarily writing a book. Again, we don't ask for like cover letters, we don't, it's not like, you know, it's not like you're applying to a graduate program, even though Cato can sometimes work like that. So like the interns, I am the supervisor in the sense of, I make sure you're there on time, I handle your payroll, and on paper, I'm the supervisor. Your workload day to day is through a kind of mentorship role with a scholar. But that being said, it doesn't necessarily work like university admissions. So I would say, again, this is a long way of saying the application is, in a way, the writing sample. So, yeah, any other questions online?
Another question is, I wanted to ask if you have any advice for graduating seniors going into grad school and wanting to conduct economic research with Cato. Are there any positions that we can apply for in the coming months?
Well, definitely the internship program. I would definitely say that. The deadline to apply for summer is March 3rd. And then the deadline to apply for the fall will be sometime in May, So a little bit more time there. And then obviously, like I would encourage you to fill out a research associate position, but I can definitely say the internship will be there and a number of our internship placement options will have you doing directly economic research. That is basically our areas of policy can be defined as economics, primarily economic matters, law, and international issues like foreign policy, and then some more domestic issues like family and opportunity studies and housing and all that. So that's what I would say. Yeah. Any other questions in the room?
We have another one online.
All right.
While being in person for an internship would be ideal, there are some personal limitations to doing so. How does the program support those who are seeking to participate remotely?
We do allow the internship remotely under extenuating circumstances. And it seems like there would be circumstance, basically like if you have personal characteristics that make a remote internship more of an option for you, then we do allow for people to Skype into seminars remotely. A number of Cato employees are also remote, and so we're pretty well equipped to allow remote interns to participate in the program. You know, that being said, obviously, we think that people just get a lot more in terms of like collaboration and community. Museum visits, that's one thing that unfortunately remote participants wouldn't get to do. And then there's also been, more recently considerations with, for the bad weather that's actually been in parts of the country where it hasn't been before. And so sometimes, remote interns experience those issues that obviously being in person, that's not an aspect of it. So that's really what I would say to that. It does appear that you would have some extenuating circumstances that I'd be happy to discuss with you. So any other questions?
I actually have some questions myself, just trying to get an idea of the volume. How many interns do you hire every year? Fellowship, associates,
Sure. So we hire about 20 or so, between 20 and 25 every semester. That's usually after filtering out a little bit before 1,000 applications. So I won't beat around the bush, it is competitive. As for the research associate role, I would say that again, those cycle out at different timelines, but I would say it's not, I wouldn't really want to be able to give a realistic estimate, but again, very competitive programs. I would say, again, I haven't been at Cato too long to really give a good estimate, but again, I would say it's maybe about like 3 or 4 a year, but again, like, I can't really trust that estimate, I would say. Our policy fellows are a lot similar, but that's not really something I manage. That's more of like actually just working at Cato, frankly. So, yeah, that's.
I was just waiting to see if you all have any other questions before I ask another one. So you went into some detail about how the application process is different. You don't require a cover letter. It's these short and long answers and what you look for and what they should do. Do you see any like common pitfalls that people fall into when answering like the long-term goal question or short-term goal question, especially for those who are in bachelor's and master's, they may not quite know yet what their long-term and, but like any things that you see that you wish, man, I wish they had really kind of worded this a different way or really used this space differently to describe themselves.
So what I would say is, again, like when I say a cohesive narrative, again, definitely people try to see this and they treat it more like a test, with isolated answers, but just consider like how each of your answers relates to each other. Like when we ask you like what books contributed to your intellectual development, does that have some resonance with the type of role you're looking for, or the types of things you're going to do, because, the reality is people have probably several favorite books. So what are those books that have been foundational to we don't ask you what your favorite books are, basically. We ask you what books have been foundational to your philosophy, and does that connect with the work you want to do? Because it's about getting a handle on where you are intellectually, because you will be dealing with really complicated ideas, and sometimes there will be readings for these seminars. And so it is worthwhile to consider that, again, there are educational components as well as professional components. And then another I would say is, so a lot of people are really passionate about a certain policy area that we do. And one of the common pitfalls is that people therefore put that on their application without considering where their core competencies are and the fact that they might be a better fit for another department. Again, this is kind of leading into just internships in general in many respects. Recognize that if it's a collaborative enough environment where scholars are approachable, which they are at Cato, then even if you're not, for example, working for we have an Islamic studies scholar, for example, and if you're passionate about that, well, it doesn't mean you won't get to interact with that person and maybe even be connected to some opportunities in that role. But consider, like if you've got concrete experience in a role that would fit for one of our departmental placements, then it is best to consider that in deciding which department to go to, so that at the very least, that means you have the strongest application possible, and then you have the opportunity to pursue what you're passionate about. So those two mainly, and then I would say, again, most people, I tend to favor conciseness, but I do think that conciseness comes after knowing how to convey your thoughts. And so another pitfall is that sometimes students don't give enough detail. So I will say that is an important part. Please be detailed. And then obviously don't use ChatGPT. Right. So that's what I was. That's not something that's I've noticed necessarily, but that's as someone who's a TA, I like to tell you that. So anyway, any other questions?
Another one online.
Very good.
Can you speak more to the day-to-day experiences of interns or responsibilities? The skills that are often developed through the program, and how this program prepares interns for future career opportunities.
Okay, so yes, day to day, you have a variety of assignments from scholars, most of whom again are the scholars who are your direct department supervisors. Again, that's more of a mentorship role. But there really isn't one, that's the thing, like, it's not like attorneys are on like an assembly line at a factory and they do more or less the same work. The department that you work in, and again, these are all illustrated in different department placement options online. That will change depending on, some people will do legal research, some people will do economic research, some people, like, I guess I could give a couple examples. Somebody was looking at housing in Singapore. Another was responding to recent decisions, or at least considerations by the Biden administration to potentially remove marijuana from Schedule 1, doing research about the rationale behind that. Schedule 1 meaning, of course, that there is no medical research according to federal law for that substance. What else? Sometimes if a scholar needs extra help, that's another thing too. Like, again, if you're passionate about something, like, let's say, you end up being the best fit for one of our legal internship with the Center for Financial and Monetary Alternatives, but you're really passionate about immigration. Well, the immigration scholar will probably reach out and ask if any interns can help them do some research. And so you'd have an opportunity to do something like that. So, and then there are some roles that might include helping out at events. There might be some roles where somebody from government affairs asks you to accompany them to the Hill. That does occur every now and then. Make sure your ties are tied and your shoes are tied. And then the second question was, what kinds of skills are developed? So again, we have workshops specifically geared toward improving your skills at writing. We also have an op-ed contest where we allow the interns to fill out, to write op-eds based on whatever issue they want. And then we actually connect you if we determine that it is of high enough quality to be connected to one of our partner organizations. I shouldn't say partner organizations, which we're affiliated with, that specializes in getting young writers published. We also have a workshop dedicated to presentations. So everyone will write presentations out and then give them about 5 minutes towards the end of the semester. And then we also have for the most part, with few exceptions, we have the seminar speakers introduced by the interns. Again, get you some practice in public speaking. We also try to connect you with trainings that can be more specific, like some of them are about giving interviews or appearing on media that some other organizations we're related to will offer. We do plan to have some other people come in who just are familiar with jobs in this area. And so it's some networking skills that really get some improvement there, because again, you'll also be invited to certain events. I suppose research skills pretty necessarily. And then a lot of soft skills as well, juggling different responsibilities, being communicative in terms of, not just your emails, but like all of your written and verbal communication in general. The ability to interact with people whose perspectives are not of your own, because again, we have a very diverse program and a bunch of different people with a bunch of different backgrounds. And then I would say in, the way that we prepare you for the next stage of your life is to not only have you develop those skills, but again, providing you this relationship with a department supervisor who, again, is not your boss like I am, and is somebody who can provide you mentorship in terms of the goals that you want to achieve. And that's why departmental fit is such a big consideration. Because what you'll want to do is you want to put yourself in a position where the person who is assigning you work and mentoring you has the ability to provide you the best quality advice. So that's what I would say to that question. Anything else?
So obviously like think tanks and like scholars are like, it's a big part of it. But like what do like a lot of the scholars like have backgrounds in? Obviously there's different departments and so what, but is it like former politicians, former educators, or like what are their backgrounds?
It's really quite varied. I mean, some again have been in law for a long time. A number of them I'd probably say a number of them have economic backgrounds. A number of them have like somebody was formerly in the CIA. There's another person there who serves on an advisory board for Facebook regarding, providing advice on content moderation. Again, I mentioned the economics professor emerita. I mentioned a couple litigants in the VC versus Heller case. It really is just a wide variety of people. We have a communications historian. We have some video production people. We have some people who do social media marketing or comms more generally. We have government affairs, so that's actually at the federal and state level. So really just a variety of backgrounds. And again, the internship program is set up with the amount of options it has to be the same way. So that's what I would say. Anything else?
I know, for example, I assume the summer internship is the most competitive out of all the 3 seasons, the fall, spring, and summer. How many freshmen or sophomores do you see that actually end up working?
So I just realized I haven't been repeating questions. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's
So,
okay.
Yeah,
That's okay.
so the question was, yes, especially in terms of the summer, how competitive are freshmen and sophomores? Again, it's not like one thing or the other. I mean, the reality is it's about the strength of your application. And importantly, like what you demonstrate to us, but also what you demonstrate to, if you do proceed to an interview with your department supervisors. So again, it's not skewed in any particular direction. We have a number of interns who are on the younger side, freshmen and sophomores. We have a number who are on the older side. What we've tended to find is that the people who either can make the time to work in DC or have enough rigor and discipline to be able to participate in what is, in many respects, a pretty full loaded, a pretty full loaded schedule, even if you're remote. Those do tend to be older people, but that's not like, that doesn't mean we favor those people. That's just kind of how it's shaken out, is that tends to be the people who can make those kinds of commitments, particularly in the spring and fall. That's what I would say. So, anything else? Anything online? All right. Well,
Yeah.
I guess we can finish up a little early, or
Yeah.
I don't know how much, that's fine.
No, yeah, we'll go ahead and finish up here. What I'll do is first thank you, Connor, for being here and chatting with everyone. I'll go ahead and end the recording here. And so all our virtual participants, I'm going to go ahead and shut off Zoom. And for those in the room, if you have some time to hang out, if you wanted to say hello, it's a chance to network, grow your professional development, professional network here with Connor and learn some more as well. We'll have a little bit more time for that offline. Right. Thank you all for being here, and I will end this session here online.
Thank you.